The world of global trade has always been complicated, but it's about to get even more unpredictable. On April 2nd, former President Donald Trump made headlines again.
So Trump has raised tariffs on China once again. His trade policies are setting off alarm bells across the globe. World leaders are scrambling to contain the fallout.
Tomorrow, the United States will implement reciprocal tariffs on other nations. It's been a long time since we even thought of that. But we will charge them approximately half of what they are and have been charging us. So,
not with a tweet, but with a trade policy that could send shockwaves through the U.S. economy: reciprocal tariffs. At first glance, reciprocal tariffs sound fair. If another country slaps a 25% tariff on American cars, the U.S. should do the same to theirs, right? It's like a playground rule: treat others the way they treat you. But global economics isn't a playground. It's an intricately connected web, and pulling one thread, especially with something as volatile as tariffs, can unravel a lot more than you'd expect. So today, we're unpacking why Trump's push for reciprocal tariffs might not just fail to help American workers and businesses, but could actually tip the United States into a full-blown recession. Let's start by breaking down what reciprocal tariffs are, and why they're different from the ones we've seen before. What are reciprocal tariffs and why do they matter? Imagine this: China slaps a 30% tariff on American-made machinery. Under Donald Trump's proposed trade policy, the US wouldn't just accept that. It would fire right back by imposing a 30% tariff on Chinese machinery. The logic: if you tax us, we'll tax you the exact same way. It's a policy rooted in symmetry. Simple, direct, tit for tat. To Trump and his supporters, this approach isn't just bold, it's fair. They argue that for decades, the United States has been playing the sucker in global trade. While America offered low tariffs and open access to its massive market, other countries, especially China, built walls of protectionism around their own. Trump claims this generosity cost the US millions of jobs, hollowed out industries, and let foreign nations grow strong at America's expense. Reciprocal tariffs, in his eyes, are the solution. No more Mr. Nice Guy. If a country wants access to the US market, they have to play by the same rules. But here's where things get tricky and dangerous. Ask almost any economist, and they'll tell you the same thing. This kind of policy sounds good in theory but can be catastrophic in practice. Why? Because tariffs aren't just weapons against foreign nations, they're boomerangs. They come back and hit your own people. Every time the US raises a tariff, it becomes more expensive to import that product. And who pays the price? Not the foreign government, not the overseas factory. You do. American businesses, American consumers. Tariffs drive up the cost of everything from raw materials to finished goods. So that fairness, Trump promises. It might come with a hefty price tag, paid in inflation, lost jobs, and a weakened economy. How tariffs hurt consumers? Let's break this down with a real-world example. Picture an American retailer that imports washing machines from abroad. Suddenly, the government slaps a hefty tariff on those imports. That retailer still needs to make a profit, still has to pay its employees, cover rent, and keep the lights on. So what happens next? They don't eat the cost, they pass it on to you. That $1,000 washing machine, now it's $1,200. Just like that. Now multiply that scenario by hundreds, maybe thousands, of product categories. Because reciprocal tariffs don't just target one or two industries. They hit everything. Any product coming from a country that charges more on US goods will now face a matching tariff when entering America. It's a policy that doesn't just raise a few prices, it supercharges inflation. Suddenly, you're not just paying more for your washer. Your TV is more expensive. So are your clothes, your groceries, even the components inside your smartphone. But price hikes are only part of the story. Tariffs also shrink the choices available to you. Think about it. If foreign companies know they'll be hit with steep tariffs just for trying to do business in the US, many of them will pull out. Why bother with the hassle? And when they leave, they take their products with them. That means fewer options on the shelves, less innovation, and, most importantly, less competition. And when there's no competition, prices go even higher, quality drops, consumers lose. So while reciprocal tariffs may sound like a strong stance against unfair trade, the real weight of that policy gets dropped on the shoulders of everyday Americans, at the checkout counter, in their utility bills, and in their shrinking savings accounts. Is fair trade really that simple? Trump's argument is simple. If they charge us more, we should charge them more. But economists argue that fairness in trade is far more complex. Under the rules of the World Trade Organization, a club of 166 nations, including the US, member countries are supposed to offer each other their best tariff rates. There are exceptions for close allies, but the general idea is, keep tariffs low, and everyone benefits. This system wasn't created because governments are naive. It was built on decades of experience that show open markets tend to lift economies. Lower tariffs mean cheaper goods, stronger competition, and more innovation. By imposing reciprocal tariffs, the US could violate those principles, and potentially trigger retaliation. The trade deficit debate. A big part of Trump's reasoning comes down to the trade deficit. The US imports more than it exports, and Trump sees that as a weakness. He argues that foreign nations have been taking advantage of our low tariffs, selling us their goods while restricting access to their markets. But economists push back hard on this. First, having a trade deficit isn't inherently bad. In fact, many countries want to invest in the US because our assets, like government bonds, are seen as safe and stable. That demand strengthens the dollar, which naturally leads to more imports. Second, much of the trade deficit is tied to our federal budget deficit. When the government spends more than it earns, it needs to borrow money, often from foreign investors. That borrowing pumps more dollars into the global economy, which foreign countries use to buy American goods, or more commonly, invest back into the US. Ironically, trying to fix the trade deficit through tariffs doesn't just fail, it can actually make the problem worse. Why tariffs can shrink exports too? Here's something counterintuitive. Higher tariffs don't just hurt imports, they hurt exports as well. When we raise tariffs, foreign countries sell fewer goods to the US, which means they earn fewer dollars. And when they have fewer dollars, they're less likely to buy American products. At the same time, the dollar becomes more valuable, making US exports more expensive abroad. So in the end, both imports and exports drop. The trade deficit, still there, but now the economy is hurting. Supply chains, the tariff whack-a-mole. Another issue with reciprocal tariffs is how companies respond. They don't just throw up their hands and accept the higher costs. Instead, they move. Take the U.S. China trade war during Trump's first term. When tariffs on Chinese goods spiked, many companies shifted production to places like Vietnam or Mexico. They still needed the goods, just not at inflated prices. Footwear brands, electronics manufacturers, and furniture companies all started rerouting their supply chains. And guess what happened? The U.S. trade deficit with China dropped, but the deficit with Vietnam grew. It's like playing economic whack-a-mole. You hit one country, and the problem pops up somewhere else. Reciprocal tariffs are logistical chaos. Then there's the issue of implementation. The US has nearly 200 trading partners and imports thousands of products. Matching tariffs line by line sounds simple in theory but becomes a logistical nightmare in practice. Imagine trying to determine the appropriate reciprocal rate for every type of fruit, textile, machine part, or tech device. Now multiply that by every country. You'd need an army of bureaucrats just to keep it organized. And here's another wrinkle. Sometimes other countries use different tax systems, like the European Union's value-added tax, VAT, which isn't a tariff at all, but Trump has suggested treating it like one. That's not just controversial, it's confusing. When protectionism backfires, what Trump is proposing is essentially a hard pivot back toward protectionism, the idea that shielding domestic industries from foreign competition makes a country stronger. But history, and most economists, disagree. Protectionist policies often lead to trade wars. One country raises tariffs, the other retaliates. That's how you end up with fewer exports, higher prices, and, ultimately, lost jobs. Take the US auto industry. It's already been struggling with global competition and automation. Reciprocal tariffs could raise the cost of imported parts, making it even harder for American automakers to compete. That could mean more factory closures, not fewer. What happens next? Isolation or inflation, or both? There are two main scenarios experts warn about. First, other countries follow Trump's lead and start raising their tariffs too. Global trade slows down, inflation spikes, and the world tips toward a recession. In the second, and more likely, scenario, countries decide the US has gone rogue. They isolate America by forging stronger ties with each other. Imagine trade deals between the EU and China, or between Japan and Canada, where the US is left out. That kind of isolation could shrink American influence on the global stage. Either way, the outcome doesn't look good. Could this lead to a recession? The short answer, yes. Rising prices from tariffs would add fuel to the already high inflation. Consumers spend less, businesses tighten their belts, investment dries up, and with global supply chains in disarray, productivity drops. Economists are warning that if reciprocal tariffs go into effect, the combination of inflation, reduced trade, and higher borrowing costs could send the US into a recession. And ironically, even if the trade deficit narrows, like Trump wants, it won't be because of stronger exports. It'll be because the economy is shrinking. Final thoughts: reciprocal tariffs might sound like a fair and bold solution. But global trade doesn't reward fairness in the way we think of it. It rewards strategy, cooperation, and stability. Trump's tariff plan may resonate with voters looking for economic justice, but in practice, it risks isolating the US, stoking inflation, and ultimately, dragging the economy into a downturn. In a world as interconnected as ours, going it alone doesn't make you stronger. It just makes you more vulnerable.